take a look at some of the headlines from today. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that the war in Gaza will not end until Hamas is fully disarmed and the territory demilitarized. His statement comes as Hamas handed over the remains of 2 hostages yesterday. Meanwhile, Israel has announced that the Rafah border crossing with Egypt will remain closed until Hamas hands over the bodies of deceased hostages. However, the release of all 20 living hostages has been completed, as the U.S. alleges Hamas plans to violate the ceasefire, while Netanyahu and Palestinian authorities continue to trade blame. Turkish Cypriots have voted in a presidential election crucial for the future of peace talks, with incumbent Ersin Tatar favoring a 2-state solution and rival Tufan Eruman supporting United Nations-sponsored federal negotiations. Now, world eyes this as a runoff that is set for October 26 if no clear winner emerges. Pakistan and Afghanistan have agreed to an immediate ceasefire after talks mediated by Qatar and Turkey, ending a week of deadly border clashes. Qatar's foreign ministry has announced that both nations will hold follow-up meetings to implement mechanisms for lasting peace and stability. Millions of Americans have rallied across all 50 states in No Kings protests against President Donald Trump's hardline policies, with organizers claiming attendance of 7 million nationwide, as protesters criticize that President Trump's actions pose a threat to U.S. democracy. Japan's Liberal Democratic Party and Japan Innovation Party, known locally as Ishin Party, have agreed to form a coalition government, paving the way for Sanai Takaichi to become Japan's first female prime minister. Under the deal, Ishin lawmakers will back Takaichi in upcoming Tuesday's parliamentary vote. President Donald Trump has announced that the U.S. struck and destroyed a drug smuggling submarine in the Caribbean, killing 2 suspects and repatriating 2 survivors to Ecuador and Colombia, claiming the vessel carried fentanyl and other drugs. Dubai's Emirates NBD to invest $3.05 billion in India as India's RBL Bank, acquiring a 60% stake in the largest foreign investment in India's financial sector. The deal via a preferential share issue worth 268.53 billion Indian rupees reflects ENBD's confidence in India's fast-growing banking market and the India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor. Now we start from the Middle East. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that the war in Gaza will end once the second phase of the ongoing truce, which involves the disarming of Hamas, is completed. Netanyahu has said that Phase B of the truce involves the disarming of Hamas and the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, following the stripping of Hamas of its weapons, and he has said that the war will only end when Phase B is successfully completed. This comes as Hamas leader Mohammad Nazal had earlier stated that disarmament was a complex issue and that he cannot commit to the group disarming. Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister's office had earlier stated that Hamas needed to disarm under any circumstance, and that Hamas was running out of time. The office had also stated that Hamas needed to adhere to the 20-point plan and release bodies of all remaining hostages. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Aaron Levarko. He's an Israeli journalist, joins us live from Netanya. Thank you very much, Aaron, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, what's going on with this peace plan? Do we see a scope of hope in this peace deal holding, the first phase? And do you think when will we be able to enter the second phase? What's your analysis?
Well, these are big questions and testing times. Look, the first steps were successful. We got all of the living captives back returned. A massive decision for Hamas to do that. what I'm reading just this morning is that reports are saying they were just tired of holding on to these captives. I don't know if that's the whole picture, but that's what I'm reading. Because it does seem uncharacteristic of Hamas to make a decision like that. They've given up all of their leverage, really. So, number one. Number two, Israel handed over approximately 2,000 prisoners, including 250 cold-blooded murderers that were put in prison because of that. So Hamas, in a way, feel like they have been rearmed with these 2,000 prisoners that are out on the streets. That has given them an injection of energy, of motivation. So they are reneging what they agreed. As Donald Trump said, they agreed that they will disarm and they will lay down their weapons. That's what they've agreed. They've reneged. Now, this morning, one of their spokesmen said, we will agree to a ceasefire, maybe between 3 to 5 years. So, but they said, we will not disarm. Now, what is that saying? They are being totally defiant of what was agreed upon, of what President Donald Trump said, along with the backing of all the nations who joined in and who signed, including the funders of Hamas. So this is a pretty serious decision by Hamas, and I think we all know what's going to be the outcome if they continue to follow this policy. In the meantime, there is a lot of civil unrest inside of the Gaza Strip. A lot of tribal factions have been actually working with the Israeli forces, and now Hamas are trying to exact revenge on some of those people. We saw a few days ago live recordings of a number of them being shot in the head dead. A number of women and families are reporting that they don't know where members of their families are. They're in detention by Hamas, and a number of people have fled. No one knows where they've gone out of fear of being killed. So there's definitely, you use the word peace. This peace is being tested, and it's going to take some time. It's going to take at least a month, 3 months, really, I think, for all these tribal infightings in the Gaza Strip. I think they've got to sort that out. They've got to get their anger out, their revenge, their vengeance, and they're going to do that. But it'll be interesting to see how Donald Trump and Israel's defense forces respond. They have to be tactical. Are they going to wait until the civil unrest calms down, or are they going to act fast? Donald Trump seems to be giving strong messages. I'm running out of time. We warned you. You promised, but you're reneging. Time will tell.
And Aaron, how realistic is the disarmament of Hamas? As you've also mentioned, that some of the prisoners or people who were released might be going back or could go join Hamas, as you've shared. And also thinking about their weapons, how much do they have, knowing that there's no corridor as long as we know this? How are they keeping on with their continuation of these armament and all these weapons that they still have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's the reason why the Rafah border crossing is closed, and it will not be open until agreements have been reached, promises have been fulfilled. And this is one of the military strategies that a lot of people in the press, journalists, who look at it only from a political perspective. You've got to understand the military aspect. Siege warfare is an ancient form of warfare, and that's what we've been doing, putting pressure on our enemies and trying to not through food, but through weapons, starving them of weapons And I don't know exactly how much weapons they've got. You know, with all these hundreds of miles of tunnels under the ground, they've obviously got some there. There has been smuggling through Egypt. There has been funding from a number of countries, but that hopefully has stopped. So it is a countdown. It is a matter of time. We don't know how long that's going to be. But how realistic is it going to be that they're going to lay down their arms? In my opinion, it's not going to happen. I think that, you know, especially with the refueling of fighters on the ground, the prisoners being released, and what will Hamas gain if they do lay down their arms? They may get a free passage to Qatar or Turkey or Egypt. I don't think Egypt, but is that going to help their cause? I don't think so. So I don't think it's realistic. Maybe at the very, very end, we might see something, but for now, doesn't look hopeful.
Thank you, Aaron, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now we stay on this topic. A convoy carrying the bodies of 2 deceased Israeli hostages have arrived at the National Institute of Forensic Medicine in Tel Aviv. Israel has stated that it has received 2 more hostage bodies on Saturday, October 18th, where 12 out of 28 bodies have been handed over to Israel under a U.S.-brokered ceasefire and hostage deal agreed between Israel and Hamas last week. Now, the war has caused a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, with nearly all inhabitants driven from their homes. A global hunger monitor confirmed that famine and health authorities overwhelmed. The dispute over the return of bodies and the delivery of crucial humanitarian aid highlights the ceasefire's fragility and could threaten U.S. President Trump's 20-point peace plan. Now for this discussion, we go back to Aaron Levarko. He's an Israeli journalist, joins us live from Netanya. Thank you, Aaron, for staying with us. Now, as you were saying, you know how Hamas has gotten more powerful or this boosted with all this what's happened in the past. So what do you think are the potential political and humanitarian consequences if phase B of the truce were to take forever? As you've mentioned, it's very, very challenging to see demilitarization of Hamas happening.
Look, the Middle East is such a difficult place to interpret and to predict. One of the ways that Donald Trump got this so-called peace plan on the table is he put his arm around the Turks, the Qataris, the Egyptians. They are and have been the main funders of Hamas and supporters. He put his arms around them. And the reason why he did that is because he knows very well that they are the main funders. But those 3 nations, America, are also in political and economic deals. And so, in a way, Trump was using leverage politically, economically, trade, and he got those 3 countries and he put pressure on those countries. And they seem to be the ones that coerced Hamas into agreeing. It's still, for me, it's still hard to believe that they agreed to release our hostages, but they did. So going back to your question, I think that this, from a political perspective, I think Donald Trump has got to, once again, go back to these nations and see what they can do. Now, there was word a few days after the peace was made that these nations were going to send delegates inside of Gaza. But there were big question marks on the motives of these 3 nations. What were they going to do once they got inside of the Gaza Strip? And that's another discussion. But so from a political perspective, I don't think, Trump can give as many warnings as he wants And it just seems that Hamas they're not afraid of him. So it may end up, rather than a political solution, a military solution. And that's what Donald Trump warned. He said, we're giving you a chance. We're giving you an open door. Here it is. If they don't take it, he made it very clear that it could take military action, which will lead to bloodshed. No one wants that, certainly not on our side. I don't think the Americans want it. The Americans don't want to send any of their forces in. But sadly to say, I think that's where we're heading. But you know what? Trump did a brilliant move by pulling off this peace plan. Let's see what else he can pull off. But I'm not too optimistic he's going to be able to. Hamas have hardened their hearts, and they're pretty adamant that they're not going to lay down their weapons unless something that you referred to before, maybe they're going to run out of weapons. And once that happens, and again, this is the old strategy of siege warfare. It can force your enemies to either take their own lives, go down with the sinking ship, or surrender. And once again, we're giving them an opportunity, a free passage to Qatar, to Turkey, maybe to Egypt. It's their choice.
Yes, Aaron, and thank you very much for staying with us and sharing that insight as an Israeli journalist from Netanyahu. Now, we stay on this topic. Hundreds of Israelis have gathered outside the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence in Jerusalem to protect and demand the return of missing hostages. The crowd held signs, waved flags, and expressed grief and anger as they chanted, "Bring them home now," repeatedly, as Israeli officials called out each of the 18 names of the deceased hostages who still remain missing. The demonstrators responded with loud, emotional cries, highlighting the deep pain and frustration of families and the community. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt will remain closed until further notice. He has further added that the reopening of the crossing will depend on Hamas and its handling over the remains of deceased Israeli hostages. This comes after the Palestinian embassy in Egypt announced that the Rafah crossing would reopen on Monday to allow Gazans residing in Egypt to return to the enclave. However, aid trucks are reportedly seen lined up on the Egyptian side of Rafah today morning, trying to enter Gaza Strip. So far, Israel has received 12 of the 28 deceased hostages under this agreement, and Palestinian authorities warned that the closure of Rafah delays the search and recovery of additional remains. Now, Hamas has criticized Netanyahu's decision as a violation of the ceasefire, while Israel continues to press for timely handover of hostage bodies. In the meantime, Gazans continue to mourn the bodies returned by Israel, including 9 Palestinians in the Bureij camp in central Gaza. According to the Hamas-run health ministry, Israel has handed over a total of 135 Palestinian bodies under the ceasefire deal brokered by U.S. Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Peter Baum. He's a foreign editor of Weekly Blitz, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Peter, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, yeah, good to see you. Now, how might this ongoing dispute over Rafah border crossing and delayed return of the deceased hostages are impacting the current Phase 1 implementation of Phase 1 peace deal?
Yeah, obviously it is having an impact, and it was very interesting listening to your previous guest, who based in Israel, who was very up to date with the latest developments. My own sources in the from the Arab media tell me that President Sisi of Egypt is hoping to open the Rafah crossing tomorrow. Although there has been quite strong talk on both sides, especially from the Israeli side, that it will remain closed. My understanding at the moment is that pressure is being borne on Israel, and that it's very possible that the crossing, which was supposed to be opened today, we know, will be opened, if not later this evening, then first thing tomorrow morning. However, if it's not, then clearly phase one of the agreement is under considerable pressure. I think both parties can live with that pressure because we've been here numerous times before, and at some stage in the not too distant future the crossing will be open. But for the world's media, let's say, it's a decent story to keep the situation in the headlines, and depending which side of the media you're on, you'll be blaming Trump and the Israeli government or Hamas and their allies. But my understanding is that political pressure is being borne on both parties, and we may see it opened later today, which in that case could fulfill the terms of the agreement, or at the very latest tomorrow. We'll have to revisit this again tomorrow and the days following, if indeed the crossing still remains closed.
Thank you, Peter, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now we stay on this topic. Hamas has rejected a statement from the U.S. State Department in which the department has cited credible reports indicating the group would imminently violate the ceasefire deal with Israel. Hamas has added that such allegations are false. This comes as the U.S. State Department had earlier said that it has credible reports that Hamas is planning an imminent attack on civilians in Gaza. The State Department has stated that the attack would violate the ceasefire agreement. The statement released by the State Department has also mentioned that a planned attack against Palestinians would be a direct and grave violation of the ceasefire agreement, and that it would undermine the significant progress that has been achieved through mediation efforts. The State Department did not provide further details on the attack, and it is unclear what reports it was citing. This comes as the first phase of the ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel is currently in progress. As per the deal, all living hostages have been released and bodies of the deceased are still being returned to Israel. Meanwhile, Israel has released nearly 2,000 Palestinian detainees so far. Now for this discussion, we go back to Peter Baum. He's a foreign editor at Weekly Blitz, joins us live from London. Thank you, Peter, for staying with us. Now, although the sources are unsighted from U.S. State Department's claim, what do you think could be the implications, and also Hamas rejecting these planning an imminent attack on civilian things, especially given the lack of disclosed evidence and fragility of this ceasefire agreement? Do you think it can hold until phase 2?
We're hoping so, of course, but let's just reflect what's happened very recently. There have already been attacks by Hamas on Gazan civilians even before the 21-point ceasefire plan was implemented. We saw that all the time in terms of Hamas attacking Palestinians on aid trucks, where they stole the food. We've seen it on Palestinians suggesting that there are certain Palestinians who are wanted the war to end and were organising demonstrations against Hamas. We saw how they came down upon them. We've seen it recently with the inter-clan rivalry between those Arab families, those clan families, who are very opposed to Hamas, and we saw how Hamas reacted by executing members in the street, albeit that those clan families did fight back. So I think all the ingredients are there. I think the source of information is credible because we're actually witnessing it. Now, it is in Israel's interests, of course, to foment dissension amongst the Palestinians themselves. The dissension is already there, but it would be a boost to Israel if it could be seen that the Palestinians gather sufficient momentum to react against Hamas. And Hamas will not take this lying down. So I think there is those reports are very credible because we're already seeing it played out in the streets of Gaza. How far it will go, again, this is something we're going to have to look forward to in the days ahead. But if outbreaks are quite severe, then of course it really does jeopardise any chance of phase 2 being implemented of the 21-point plan. So again, I think the reports are credible because we're seeing interfaction murders going on in Gaza. Hamas are still strong, but those families are gathering momentum. They're getting more support from the Palestinians themselves, and they're being emboldened by Israel. So the next 48 hours could be crucial.
Yes, indeed. We will be eyeing that over here. Thank you very much, Peter Baum, for joining us and sharing your